changed anything. Stand by for the video live stream of Virgin Atlantic's Business is an Adventure in proud partnership with Investec, live from Johannesburg, South Africa. Ordinary never changed anything. Stand by for the video live stream of Virgin Atlantic's Business is an Adventure in proud partnership with Investec, live from Johannesburg, South Africa. Ordinary never changed anything. Stand by for the video live stream of Virgin Atlantic's Business is an Adventure in proud partnership with Investec, live from Johannesburg, South Africa. Ordinary never changed anything. Stand by for the video live stream of Virgin Atlantic's Business is an Adventure in proud partnership with Investec, live from Johannesburg, South Africa. Ordinary never changed anything. Stand by for the video live stream of Virgin Atlantic's Business is an Adventure in proud partnership with Investec, live from Johannesburg, South Africa. Ordinary never changed anything. Stand by for the video live stream of Virgin Atlantic's Business is an Adventure in proud partnership with Investec, live from Johannesburg, South Africa. Ordinary never changed anything. Stand by for the video live stream of Virgin Atlantic's Business is an Adventure in proud partnership with Investec, live from Johannesburg, South Africa. I call it business with a twist. Flight attendants and cabin crew, please prepare the stage for arrival. Fasten your seatbelts. It's time for Virgin Atlantic's Business is an Adventure in proud partnership with Investec.
Hello, I'm Maps Mapunyani, and welcome to the Johannesburg edition of Virgin Atlantic's Business is an Adventure in proud partnership with Investec. We're broadcasting live from Johannesburg to the world from the iconic Studio 10 at Urban Brew Studios. We've gathered more than 700, I beg your pardon, of South Africa's brightest thought leaders in business and entrepreneurship together in this one studio for an epic adventure along with you, our audience around the globe, from Lagos to London, and of course our special guests, our valued Investec and Virgin Atlantic clients. Now that deserves a round of applause. Business is an Adventure is a global business and entrepreneurship thought leadership event series led by Sir Richard Branson, who will join us a little later. And can I just point out proudly that Johannesburg is the only city in the world so far to host this event for a second time following the first Johannesburg edition back in 2017. So, I think that's something to be proud of too. And that was also a fantastic event in itself. Today, in 3 engaging discussions, we will hear words of wisdom from, amongst others, a futurist, a diversity advocate, PhDs, global CEOs, captains of industry, and a whole host of thriving entrepreneurs, and the UK government's Trade Commissioner for Africa. We want these messages of business, insight, and inspiration to take flight all around the world. So share your discussions with the world using the hashtag #BusinessIsAnAdventure, and be sure to tag @Investec and @Virgin Atlantic. That's hashtag #BusinessIsAnAdventure and tag @Investec and @Virgin Atlantic. The global conversation starts now. Fueling our adventure today are two iconic brands that are passionate about inspiring entrepreneurship and empowering Africa's economy as we hurtle into the fourth industrial revolution. To tell us more about Virgin Atlantic's commitment to the development of business in Africa, please say hello gorgeous to Virgin Atlantic's Head of Middle East, Africa and India, Redi Tlhabi.
Hi, I'm Redi Tlhabi, and it is an absolute pleasure for me to be here today and to represent Virgin Atlantic at this fabulous event. I want to welcome all of you here, and I want to thank you and say thank you to our special partner, Investec, for bringing this event to life. We have many very special guests with us today, and including our senior leadership team here from around the world. So they've flown in from the UK, US, Hong Kong, India, and from Nigeria. They are all mostly British. They all sat in the very front row here. And if you want to give them some rugby advice, you can do so during the break. So the Virgin Atlantic Business and Adventure series has made its way around the world over the past 4 years. These events have inspired entrepreneurs and business communities in Washington, Seattle, Los Angeles, Barbados, and just a couple of weeks ago in our newly launched destination, Tel Aviv. Next month, we're in Mumbai, so I'm very proud to share that this is the second time that we bring Business and Adventure to Johannesburg. Sir Richard, who you will meet in a short while, started this airline in 1984. He was 34 years old. He was an aviation novice who wanted to shake things up. He started the airline with one aeroplane and the fundamental belief that he could make flying fun for people. 35 years later, we continue to challenge the status quo, we innovate, and we seek out new opportunities to be better for our customers. We operate one of the youngest fleets in the sky, most technologically advanced fleets in the sky, and over the past decade, we've managed to reduce carbon emissions by over 20%, and we've recently shared our ambitious plans to become Britain's second flag carrier. Our ambition is to become the world's most loved travel company. We've been flying between Johannesburg and London for the past 23 years, and this year in April, we launched our brand new Airbus A350-1000, and I'm delighted today to unveil that South Africa will be the first country outside of the US that will take delivery of the A350 next year. It'll offer our customers It'll offer our customers a unique, custom-made onboard experience. It will be transforming our fleet throughout, and it will be the quietest and the most fuel-efficient aircraft in the sky. Once again, Virgin Atlantic will be elevating the custom experience with custom-made window-facing seats, an evolved social space called the Loft, faster Wi-Fi in the sky, and Bluetooth on board. And other highlights include larger screens throughout the cabins, and we'll be rolling out a whole new set of sustainable amenity-keyed sleep suits and bed linen fleet-wide as well. The A350 is the impetus for change across our fleet. We're inspired by the growth opportunities here in South Africa. Johannesburg is the heartbeat of Africa. It is energetic, and it's home to many entrepreneurs, great business leaders, and communities. South Africa is also the UK's largest and most valuable trading partner in Africa. It is the destination of the greatest portion of UK investment, placing the UK as the largest foreign investor into South Africa. We understand the important role that investment can play in creating and sustaining jobs and helping companies to grow. The truth is, investment goes far beyond capital flows and statistics. It's all about helping people realize their potential, including all the partnerships, community and leadership initiatives and friendship that exist between these two great countries. Today's event will be a beacon of hope for the future of our country. I hope it instills in all of us a sense of vibrancy, creativity, and entrepreneurship that will underpin South Africa's success. Diversity of background, race, outlook, and gender are business advantage. Today, we will dive into the way successful organizations are driven forward by a belief in diversity. We will also gain insights from business leaders that have out-of-the-ordinary stories to help businesses navigate in a tough economy, finding opportunities in an emerging market. The Businesses and Adventure series is on a mission to uncover how South Africa's brightest business leaders can make that adventure epic. Thank you all for your drive, your inspiration, and your partnership and your friendship.
Next, Investec is an international bank and wealth group that partners with its clients to provide a range of distinctive products and services. Business is an adventure when you have an invested partner who thrives on being out of the ordinary and seeks to understand you and your business and how together we can turn potential into growth. Please welcome the head of marketing for Investec South Africa, Danny Dixon.
Hello. Thank you to our partner Virgin Atlantic. It has been an adrenaline-rushing, trust-building, friendship-making adventure. And thank you for joining us today. We do have some of the most experienced, most respected, and most exciting business minds on the panel today. We're here to gain insights into what they are thinking and how they plan to react to the future, and to understand what it means to do business in a world that is changing. We do live in a world where trust is first gained and then earned, where trade wars are the new normal. A tweet can tank an economy, and climate is changing the financial landscape. We certainly are living out of the ordinary times. So how can we, as marketers and businessmen, be prepared for a future that is so difficult to predict? Today, through simple human conversations, we get to share some wisdom, some inspiration, shine a light on some uncertainty and opportunities that lie ahead, where together we can help find solutions. We know that as the world and markets evolve, so does your business. At Investec, we want to partner with you to really understand you and your business, so that you don't just survive the next evolution, you come out thriving. Business is an adventure when your bank has a keen eye for the potential, because we take time to understand you, our client, face to face, step by step, side by side. That is what we call business made human. The potential within this room to build and contribute to our economy, to create those jobs, to contribute to society, to truly live diversity and inclusion in ways that live far beyond the boardroom and far beyond what we talk about today. And to be honest, that's what makes me very excited to work at Investec. We are excited by what we're capable of in this country, bursting from pride, and I'm wearing the green today, of the rugby team's success over the weekend. Where some will see time as 28 past 11, we will forever see it as 32 to 12. The World Cup victory has certainly inspired our nation. It's that same sense of passion and of coming together that inspired Investec for the last 45 years as a truly South African business. From humble beginnings to award-winning world-class bank and wealth business operating internationally, Investec has always been proud of its South African heritage. We'll continue to give rise to a more inclusive economy, along with that never-say-die attitude and humility that the Springboks showed us so passionately this weekend. We know we can continue to partner with our clients to embrace opportunities to grow and thrive for all South Africans. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Liesl, and thank you very much, Danny. One more big round of applause for our sponsors for bringing us here today. Diversity It is top of mind for brands and businesses today because aside from anything else, it produces best business outcomes. But what really goes on behind those closed doors of the world's boardrooms? In just a minute or two, a doyen of investigative journalism in South Africa, Carte Blanche's Claire Mawisa, will lead a discussion on how diversity builds business advantage. And in about an hour from now, we look forward to a fireside chat with Sir Richard Branson and Investec co-founder and former CEO, Stephen Koseff. But right now, let's look to the future and why Africa's future is bright with some of South Africa's most influential business figures as we all get ready to turn the corner into a brand new decade just over 60 days from now.
I'm walking into the next decade with a mindset that is of innovation and change.
And I guess being in Africa at this time makes it all the more exciting because there's just so much more potential.
My view on business as we move into the next decade is one of positive impact, one where Africa will finally reap the positive impact of technology.
I think the African borders are often borders we don't cross because Africans tend to separate themselves. So I would just like to invite the rest of Africa into my business.
I'm feeling very optimistic. Being in Africa at this time.
Business has become easily accessible. It's become tangible. It's no longer for the elite.
If I look at the next decade in terms of business, I think that we need to have a mindset that revolves around being resilient and versatile.
And certainly being in South Africa, we're in a hub, an exciting hub, and I'm just proud and optimistic to be a part of it.
Hello, Johannesburg and the world. I'm Claire Mawisa, and this is Virgin Atlantic's Business is an Adventure in proud partnership with Investec. Last year, the Harvard Business Review formally confirmed that diversity does indeed yield quantifiable dividends in business. But what is happening out there in the real world? And more importantly, how can we as a business community get better at empowering the people within our organizations? Virgin Atlantic, for example, provides unconscious bias training to 2,000 of their top leaders. Last year, they launched a diversity and inclusion strategy that aims to achieve a 50-50 male-female balance in their workforce by 2022, as well as a 12% BAME representation for Black, Asian, and minority ethnic employees. This past June, Virgin Atlantic operated the world's first Pride flight, fully staffed by LGBTQ personnel for World Pride. And this past March, they updated their uniform and makeup policy so that their staff can choose whether or not to wear makeup and heels or trousers in place of skirts. And Investec, for their part, are ranked 27th in the world and 4th in the UK for progress in gender equality. By building inclusion, Investec works to retain an out-of-the-ordinary workforce and create an environment where every employee finds it easy to be themselves and feel that they belong. No wonder Investec is rated the second most attractive employer in South Africa. Yeah. This kind of attention to diversity of background, race, outlook, and gender within an organization has been shown to be a business advantage. So, to delve deeper into how diversity delivers profit, we are joined by futurist and author Faith Popcorn, CEO of the Youth Employment Service of South Africa, Dr. Tashmia Ismail. We also have Global Head of People, Investec, and Professor at Middlesex University in London, Dr. Mark Khan. and lawyer and diversity advocate Thando Hopa. Thank you so much for joining me. Faith, I'm going to start with you. What are some of the business benefits of inclusion, and how do these dynamics positively impact the workplace?
You know, first of all, I want to say it's not a choice anymore. And these are such unordinary times. You need an unordinary bank, an unordinary everything. And, you know, we're seeing that when there's diversity in the boardroom, for instance, business is up 35%. When there are females in high levels, business does so much better. The thing about, now we're saying diversity, so now we kind of mean, like, are we mixing black and white, right? Male and female, but that's just the beginning. Gender fluidity is absolutely the future. When we look back, we're going to say men and women, that's a joke. I mean, that was nothing. And I just want to, you know, people say to me when I talk about gender fluidity, and we can come back to this later if you want, why do we have to do this? You know, I don't want to do this. And by the way, it's not up to you. I mean, people want to be recognized and bring their whole self to work. So if they're fluid, if they're binary, if they're just plain crazy, you know, if they're gay, if they're embarrassingly straight, you know, now they just want to bring their whole, and I believe that certainly Richard has always been a little bit like to the bubbles to the left. Yes. And Investec, you know, by saying unordinary, you have to be unordinary and you have to be special, and to be human in these inhuman times is a most gorgeous mission. So, is that a good start?
That's a fantastic start. And Dr. Ishmael, we think diversity, we have to think youth as well. What potential do the youth of South Africa have? We know that they're unemployed. We know that they're struggling to even get an education. What potential is still trapped within our youth that we haven't unlocked yet?
So youth are going to be your future customers. They're going to be your future employees. They're going to be the custodians of the South African economy and the world economy. And currently, 6.7 million of these young people, over a third of our youth population, are completely locked out of the jobs market. And this is quite often translates into lifetime unemployment. I'll bring some sobering stats into this very glamorous space. The sobering stat is that an unemployed person costs the country 1.2 million over a lifetime. If we don't put these young people into work, that'll cost us 7.9 trillion as a country. And they have the potential to be brought into the workforce and to become contributors. And within youth, there's a massive diversity of youth who are grads, youth who are semi-skilled, those who don't have a matric. But we've learned through research around the world, Tata, and I'll add this little stat in, Tata took underprivileged youth from slum communities to bring them into coding courses, and obviously couldn't waste the money because these were expensive courses, so they did psychometric profiling on these youth with a game called NAC, which you can all play. And they tested these cohorts against MBA students in Europe from consulting firms, and on aptitudes around ambition and particular subjects like STEM, science, entrepreneurship, innovation across the board. They matched. And in some cases, these young people surpassed the results of these MBAs. So there's this massive potential sitting in our 6.7 million, and the Youth Employment Service is here to help business unlock that and bring them into the world of work.
Wow. Now, Dr. Mark, you're like the big HR guy at Investec. So all the business leaders here are listening to you and they're thinking, which department in an organization is responsible for bringing in that diversity and ensuring that it happens in the workplace?
So the answer to that is yes.
Yes, what?
So I'm glad we've got an airline represented here, because on an aeroplane, who's responsible for safety?
Everyone.
Everyone's responsible for safety. And that is a very important answer to your question. Everyone in the company is responsible for diversity and inclusion. Yes, leadership will take the lead. Yes, the HR function will support the endeavor, but everyone's responsible for diversity and inclusion.
Mm. And Thando, in your life and in your career, from law to fashion to advocacy, what has your personal experience been when it comes to diversity?
I think it's been quite an interesting experience because my career from law to fashion to advocacy has always been involved in representation. But the interesting thing is that diversity, what I noticed is people tend to think that diversity and inclusion are the same thing, and they're not. Diversity is when you're dealing with perceivable differences, so race, gender, etc. But inclusion really requires you to look at change structurally, attitudinally, behaviorally. And I think what I noticed in my career is that people would think, okay, we have this model who's got albinism and she's on the cover and tick, you know. But that's diversity, that's fine, but it's symbolic. Inclusion requires you to be able to hone that voice for that person to actually participate in that sphere. So I think that, you know, there's a bit of education that's required.
So Dr. Mark, from what Thando is saying, if I'm an organization, can I just make sure that I've got diversity, then automatically I'm going to see benefits and I'm going to see better decisions being made if I've got a diverse group of people in my organization?
So, very good question, Tano, spot on. I mean, the real debate is around inclusion and belonging, because it's not enough to have representation. Just because you've got the right percentage of this type of person and that type of person in a team does not mean that you will have an improved team function and or organizational outcomes or better decision making. It's not enough. It is important. What is required is a culture of inclusion and belonging, because it's only in that culture that the interaction between those differences can come together in a productive way. And we see this is a common failure. And I think you spot on when you're on the cover, like, oh, tick. All right, we've got a woman on the team. Okay, we've got X people of color on the team. Great, now we can all get on with business. Fail. That's a fail. First step is to get the representation. But the real hard work is to have a leadership that builds an environment where that difference can have a voice and is not marginalized. And so often we do see this problem where appointments are made, then down the line things don't go well, and then the naysayers, what do they say?
They say, well, it didn't work. I did everything I was told to do. I've got the team. It's all a Rainbow Nation. Why is it not working?
Exactly. You see what happens? We put the people on and it didn't work. And what's really happened there is that they just stopped at the diversity representation point and they did not create the environment, the culture of inclusion. So you then had a marginalization of those voices. You know, you're the only woman on an all-male team, that's great, but you never get a chance to speak and you get asked to make the tea. You know,
yes.
It happens. I mean, never at Investec or Virgin, but at other companies.
You've got a nice example to explain the fact of diversity and inclusion.
Right.
Could you give that example?
So it's a cute one. Diversity is when you get invited to the dance. Inclusion is when someone asks you to dance. And belonging is when you dance madly because you don't care who's watching.
Isn't that so clear? That's fantastic. Faith, you touched on it a little bit earlier, but could you give us an idea of what are the current trends, some current trends and future trends when it comes to the dynamics in gender and other aspects of diversity? Because I don't think people understand when you said fluid, everyone was like, oh, I'm not sure I get what she's saying.
So this HR guy, really big multinational, big shot HR guy. You know, we're talking about this, you know? He was wearing a pink shirt, by the way. I pointed that out to him. He goes, oh, no. So anyway, he said, does this, you know, I said, Facebook recognizes 71 genders. 71. Okay, it's really endless what you could be, you know? So, and confusing. You come to work one way, in the middle of the day you're something else, and that's what millennials love, right? So he said, now I have to have 71 bathrooms? I said, no, you have to have one bathroom. And that explains it. And I'll just point to my friend, the clownfish, one of my favorite fish. My little friend is gone, I don't know. So the clownfish, the top fish is a female, and she surrounds herself with male fish, male clownfish. So when she dies, a male comes to the top. The second in command is a male. And he turns immediately into the female. And that is the model for the Fortune 200. That it's the fluidness, it's not how you think or your religion or this and that. It's how the millennials, which are going to, or in Gen Z, $46 billion only. Do you want to really skip them? And they feel that they, them, theirs, he, her. They don't want to be pigeonholed. And the funny thing is, if you follow them around, they say, I'm gender fluid, but follow them around for the day. 28% of millennials don't want to be identified by gender. But if you follow them around, they say, what is this? They're heterosexual. I mean, they're having sex with the opposite sex. That's how I look at it. So, you know, but the thing is that they don't want to be pigeonholed. And they want to be respected, that they don't want to be pigeonholed. So I think you're going to try to ignore this, but it's not ignorable. And if you're going to come into a lot of like friction and conflict if you don't take this in. So maybe like black and white's going to seem easy next to that. That's the next thing that we have to be.
And Dr. Ishmael, what are people's or organizations' attitudes towards the youth? Because as Faith is talking, I'm thinking, oh, this is a tricky bunch that's coming up that I'm going to try and incorporate in my organization. Are people looking at youth as this untapped, amazing potential, or are they thinking, oof, I don't know if I
wish I didn't have to talk to this guy in the skirt.
Exactly.
But you do have to. And, you know, you were saying something beautiful about the airline, Mark. You know, you said everybody's responsible for their own safety. So, and you were saying something about, like, if you put your arm around someone and invite them home for dinner and introduce them to your kids, that's really when you mean it. And I think that if everybody puts their arm around one person, I mean, at Investec, this woman named Ilse, she told me something beautiful. She said, you know, she walked into a grocery store, there's this beggar outside, oh, another one, you know. She goes, okay, I'm going to buy him some bread and some this and that, and brings it out to him. He said, this is the first time my children will be eating in 3 days. Okay. And she says, and it's true, and you're saying it's a one-on-one thing. One kid, you know, one person, one beggar, put your arm around somebody, one diverse person. And I know, I mean, I adopted my kids. I have 2 Chinese kids, 21 and 15, okay? And I adopted them because of Colin Powell. I said to him, Colin, you know, run for president. I begged him, please, you know. That was foresight, but he said, no. You know, he says, what I want you to do is take one person and pull them up and out. So I adopted my first Chinese child, and then she wanted a sister. So I got my second one, and I'd take 6 more. So it's truly, and I'm sure you see this, a one-on-one thing. If you look at the crowd, you'll just want to, you can't. You can't stop. One. So if everybody goes home today, takes just one, that's all, not 2, not 3, just one. You will be so lifted, and you will solve the problem. There will be no problem.
Are organizations open to the youth, or are they viewing the youth as a potential high risk?
I can actually answer that by leading on from some of what Faith has described. There's initially quite a fear of bringing young people into the workforce, because if you've got labor laws that make it difficult to get a person out, you know, it can be tricky. Also, often youth are coming from very different backgrounds, their cultural gaps, educational gaps. But this idea of turning mentors into heroes, and a lot of those positions are seen to be successful if you prepare the company for young people coming in and saying, you're the hero here. You can transfer skills and learning. And after a few months, we have companies phoning into Yes who are very fearful about taking large numbers of youth on board. And they phone back and say, wow, they've just brought this fresh thinking. They pick up on new things so fast. They've taught us a few things on how to modernize parts of the business. And so if you set expectations, if you turn some people into heroes and give others the space to allow those ideas to come about, you can turn that around, that mindset of what it means to bring diversity into your organization. In our case, a lot of it is about bringing youth into your organization.
Just on a global scale, Mark, could you share with us where is South Africa from an HR perspective when it comes to, are we more or less progressive when it comes to diversity in our organizations? Where is South Africa?
It's a good question. I mean, I think that it's a both-and answer. So we are progressive and leading the world in one way, but in another way, we've got some big gaps. So clearly, South Africa has got a very strong history in the last 20 years of trying to level the playing field, given apartheid. So when it comes to race as a particular form of difference, this is what we would call, foreground in the country. And in many ways, South Africa is a role model on how to work in organizations around race. But one of the unintended consequences of that is that other forms of difference become less visible. So, for example, if we look at the legislation in this country, which is excellent legislation in terms of leveling that playing field, it doesn't account for faith's narrative around sexual orientation. So, for example, where are we in creating an environment where no matter what your sexual orientation is or what your gender identity is, you feel it's easy to be yourself in workplaces in this country? And when you compare the two, you'll find from a race point of view, we're very active, very progressive, but from a sexual orientation point of view, we are trailing behind the United States by some way, as an example. And I'll just conclude by saying, this is one of the tricky things about this field, is that when you start identifying groups that you need to correct for based on history, you inadvertently marginalize other groups that don't necessarily have a voice. And that is why we prefer to have a more inclusive environment. I love the example of you need one bathroom, not 71 bathrooms. And that's so often the mistake. Okay, which 5 groups are we going to fix at Virgin or Investec? Well, that's all great, but what about the other 70 groups or 60 or whatever it might be? And that's what's about the cultural context of this, not identifying and then targeting particular groups, although we have to do that as well. I know you feel the same way.
So hard in agreement. Hallelujah. That's what she wants to say to Mark.
I'll tell you, one of the most wonderful experiences of my life is I had this big client, and as soon as I stepped in, the client said, we've got all of these hair products, but we don't know if you want to bring in something that you use. And I said, oh, no, these are natural hair products, all of them are fine. And then they said to me, while they were doing my makeup, they said, what do you do with your eyebrows? I said, oh, no, I keep them pale. And then they put me into this beautiful dress, and the lady said, the back is open over here. Are you comfortable with that? I said, yes, I'm comfortable. That dealt with race, albinism, and gender. I didn't feel my body at one time. I didn't feel the weight of my body. I didn't feel female. I didn't feel like I had albinism. I just felt like I was a person in a place. And this is before we even took the shot. So I think, for me, that was an inclusive environment. And one of the factors that you can hone out from that is that it was a consultative framework. I was landing on an environment that was open to consultation.
Yes. I mean, you're one of the 100 most influential women in the world. What are some of the barriers that you're still facing? You've given us 3 great examples of just simple questions that they asked, that they consulted you on. But what are some of the barriers you're still facing when it comes to diversity and inclusion?
I think there is this particular concept that was coined by an American professor, Professor Cranshaw, and the term is intersectionality. So intersectionality is I'm going to try and make it as simple as possible. I am in a body that has identities that have, or more than one identity, that has a history of marginalization, discrimination, or oppression. In other words, race, gender, albinism, and also being African. So I realized that when I started, I said, I want to represent albinism in a positive way. But it was such an oversimplification, because when a project comes, I have to think about race representation, gender representation, how Africa is being represented, and how albinism is being represented. And it becomes a difficult situation. It was one of the difficulties that I experienced, because there's a singular identity myth. You only have to deal with albinism and everything will be fine after that. And that's not true, because when I go to Europe or when I go to the United States, they have a particular perception about Africa. So they'll say, what is the prejudice that you face as an African with albinism? You're dealing with two questions there. You're dealing with albinism and you're dealing with the perception that people have about Africa. And I'm both, So it's like, what do I do? What do I do? And the second thing is rubber stamping of representation. I struggled a lot, mostly with traditional media, in that I was expected to rubber stamp whatever people thought my story was, instead of having equal control over representation. And the projects that did the best, I don't think I can name brands, but the projects that did the best and that actually won awards, etc., were projects that allowed us to co-create in the space and where I could have equal control over my representation. Yeah.
Wow. Do you want to add something?
I think that's so powerful, and I'll make it personal for me. When I was a younger man, I used to visit my grandmother at an old-aged home, and I'm using those words intentionally. So now we're talking about ageism. There was an elderly fellow who was just waiting to cross the street with a walking stick, and I approached him and took him by the arm to help him across the road. And he went like this, "I don't need your help." And I walked off thinking,
I tried my
right, you try and help people. You try and help people, okay? Now, you see, what I missed there is what you were saying. What I missed there was I made an assumption about his abilities based on his age. That's a form of marginalization. And what I could have done was say, would you like some assistance crossing the road? Mm-hmm. Which would have given him the dignity of his own voice. And he would have said, I'm fine, thank you very much. But my failure to know that, I walked away judging him and he felt marginalized by virtue of the interaction. And that's what we forget to do. That's the consultation that is being referred to here.
So true. But then it requires us to be quite mindful as we operate, right, in all of the spaces that we're going into. I know we might have incredible policies written about diversity and inclusion, but what do we then do to make sure that those policies are actually enforced and that diversity actually happens?
All this talk of sharing bathrooms, I don't know if I'm ready to share yet.
Okay. I'm a neat peer.
But I have to get over that. And it takes time to get over your fears around certain things. So if there was a rule that there was one bathroom and that rule was enforced, it would become my norm. And I think if we can start to create those types of rules that turn this behavior into the norm in a country, but we have to enforce those policies. So, we have primal wirings, and then we have societal layers over those primal wirings. And sometimes those societal norms are just very unhealthy. I'm an Indian female. I started lecturing when I was quite young, and I remember executive lecturing for business school. Walking into a room, and it was a very undiversified company. That was one of my first talks, and I could feel that in the first 10 minutes, I had to not be myself. I had to act very tough, although that's stuck. I had to act very tough and be very firm and put on this voice of authority to get the men in that room to take what I was saying seriously. And it became my ritual, that the first 10, 15 minutes I would really have to mark my territory and establish myself. And I remember we got evaluations after all of these, and one of the evals from that same group, I remember it very clearly, was klein botteltjie groot gif. But I was judged on the botteltjie, on the bottle, before, the poison that I gave to the group. So we do need to. Everybody struggles with this. It does hold you back. It does create barriers, and everyone deserves a chance to be able to move through freely. And I think that great legislation and policy making and enforcement of that gives people who have valuable contributions a pathway to be able to make it. Because if we don't make the policies and make it easy for people to show you what they can do and deliver, we lose out on vast talent that would otherwise have really taken us forward as a country.
Now, just quickly to wrap up, I want to ask each one of you, we're speaking to leaders, we're speaking to organizations today, what is your final golden nugget that you would like to leave with them when it comes to diversity giving business an advantage? I'll start with you, Faith.
So, our company looks out and then looks back to the present, right? And I would say, if you really want to understand this, do Snapchat, because you can be a hippopotamus, you can be a monkey, you can be anything you want. And looking down the road, understand where it's going, because it'll give you a better perspective. Well, nobody's going to be pregnant. We're going to have our babies in, beautiful tanks, There's not going to be, genders like this. There's going to be, incredible fluidity. We're going to cross with robots. We're already doing that. If you have a knee that's, robotic knee or shoulder, you've done it already. You don't even as a matter of fact, you've, in your phone, you have already married your phone. Yeah. So I'd say, don't think about yourself. Think about them. And I think that would do it. And put your arm around them. Put your arm literally, and, have your lawyers there.
Just in case.
Put your arm around them. Fantastic. And you will get what you deserve.
Thank you. Dr. Ishmael, what would you like to leave with the people that are listening to this conversation today about diversity giving that organization an advantage?
I would like to use science to make points really firmly. They looked at indicators, communities or clusters around the world, business clusters around the world. And what were those variables, what were those factors that made those communities innovative? Because we know innovative is one of the best ways to confer business advantage, innovativeness. And it was the proportion of homosexuals in that society that was the biggest predictor of the innovation level. And it speaks to the fact that those are spaces where homosexual people feel comfortable, and therefore it is a place that is tolerant and accepting and gives a voice to people of that who make that sexual choice. And so I don't think we can put it any more plainly than the science says. Empirically, it's proven that the more diverse and open you are to wider thought and acceptance and giving it voice, the more competitive you will be.
Thank you. Dr. Khan, what would you say?
So I'm going to quote Investec's vision for diversity, inclusion, and belonging. I'm going to take it, and I want to share it because I love it so much. Our vision is it's a place where it's easy to be yourself, and we underline the word easy. And I offer this as a way for leaders to think a little differently about diversity. Diversity is not about numbers and representation and having these groups. Yes, that is a component. Think about the individuals, the human beings in your environment, and consider how easy it is for them to be themselves. How much of themselves do they need to put aside in order to work in your space? No matter what they are, where they are, who they are. That's the vision. And other companies can have it too. It's fine. It's not copyright.
You're giving it away. And Tando, from you?
Do you know what I've noticed? And I think Mark has really also said it, is what would set your business apart is values. It's what your business values are. I think they will shape the kind of leaders you choose, and they will shape the kind of policies that you have. And with respect to diversity, if you approach it as an obligation and not as a place of opportunity, like just a wealth of untapped potential, then it's not going to work for you. But if you approach it with opportunity and a wealth of untapped potential, then you'll be able to hone the creative energies of all the individuals in that space to your benefit.
Wow, phenomenal. Thank you. Diversity of background, race, outlook, and gender has definitely been shown to be an advantage in business and in an era that's becoming more and more competitive by the minute. To stay ahead of the curve is to bend the curve and define a new normal. Thank you so much to our guests for your thought-provoking discussion. Futurist and author Faith Popcorn, thank you so much.
Thank you.
CEO of the Youth Employment Service for South Africa, Dr. Tashmia Ismail, thank you so very much. Thank you so much to the head of PR and People and professor at Middlesex University, London, Dr. Mark Khan, thank you so much. And international model and lawyer and diversity expert and advocate, Thando Hopa. Thank you also very much.
Today is about doing things differently. So don't forget to share your business is an adventure experience by using the hashtag Business is an Adventure and tagging at Virgin Atlantic and Investec.
Live from the iconic Studio 10 at Urban Brew Studios, more than 700 of South Africa's thought leaders in business and entrepreneurship have assembled here today to thrust forward into a new business frontier with Virgin Atlantic's Business is an Adventure in proud partnership with Investec. But when we say business is an adventure, what does that adventure look like to you?
Business is an adventure, life is an adventure, and I think the best way to describe it for me is I feel sometimes like I'm in a Bear Grylls episode, fighting through the thorns, the snakes, and no water.
It's like a fairy tale, but you never get to the happily ever after because there's always something, so it really keeps you on your toes.
If you're not describing business as an adventure, then I kind of think you're doing it wrong.
Business is always an adventure because you just never know if you're going to succeed. And the exciting process of working on something and making it successful, that's the adventure.
Trying to make your business bigger, better, more accessible. It's great. It's a challenge, but it's a fun one too.
But there's always a way to get out, and it forces us to use the tools that we've never thought of using before. So yes, it is an adventure, but so is life.
If it doesn't excite you and scare you and you're not passionate about it, then I don't think you're doing the right kind of business.
I'm Mabs Mabunane, and we are broadcasting live from Lagos to London, from Delhi to Dubai, from the States to Tel Aviv. Well, you catch my drift. All places that Virgin Atlantic can fly you to, by the way. And I think, I was just saying, we're beaming Virgin Atlantic's Business and Adventure in proud partnership with Investec from Johannesburg into the universe. Business is an Adventure is a global business and entrepreneurship thought leadership event series led by one of the world's most famous entrepreneurs, Sir Richard Branson, who will be joining us in just a few moments. Today we're doing a deep dive into the state of business with panels of esteemed business adventurers, CEOs, and diplomats. We want today's business insights and messages of inspiration to be heard around the world. So please share your hot takes and opinions with the world on social media using hashtag #BusinessIsAnAdventure and tag @Investec and @Virgin Atlantic. The global conversation starts now. In the words of Sir Richard Branson, ordinary never changed anything. And in a time where change is the only constant, business out of the ordinary is without a doubt key to unlocking a competitive advantage. Since its launch over 3 decades ago, Virgin Atlantic has set a new example in the business world for doing business for good and always putting people at the heart of everything that they do. But what is business out of the ordinary today? What does it feel like? What does it look like? And with what kind of business mindset should we be forging into this new decade? Award-winning South African author and journalist Redi Tlhabi will be seeking 2020 vision and answer next with a little help from anything but ordinary friends.
Very enthusiastic this afternoon from Johannesburg to the world. This is Virgin Atlantic's Business is an Adventure in proud partnership with Investec. Now, Business is an Adventure is a global business and entrepreneurship thought leadership event series that is led by Sir Richard Branson, who's joining me right now in our discussion around business out of the ordinary. Along with Investec's Global Joint CEO, Fanny Titi, Emma Wade-Smith, Her Majesty's Trade Commissioner for Africa, and of course, Kim Reid, who is the CEO and founder of takealot.com. There was a lot of applause there. I think you've changed a lot of people's lives with takealot.com, right? And finally, a man who epitomizes doing everything unordinary. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the chairman of Virgin Group, a man who actually needs no introduction, Sir Richard Branson. Wow. I feel like saying, ladies and gentlemen, we have begun our descent. Thank you very much. Okay, so the theme for this morning, I'm finding it very aspirational, very positive. Business is an adventure. But we live in such a turbulent world. There is so much uncertainty. You all are sounding very, very positive about business. Business is an adventure. I almost want to add, but it is also a challenge. What reason, Fanny, I'll start with you. What reason do you have to be optimistic about anything, about business?
Look, Redi, at Investec, we are about supporting our clients to grow their businesses and to manage their wealth. So by definition, we bring a mindset of risk-taking, and we bring a mindset that there is opportunity even in difficult times. The economic backdrop, both here in South Africa and in the UK where we operate, is quite tough. But we bring a sense to our clients that we can find opportunities and we can back them and we can manage the risks that are associated with the opportunities that we find. I think that's how progress occurs when business people, entrepreneurs, and financial institutions like Investec back opportunity for progress.
Mm-hmm. And so, Richard, I want to come to you on this one. The optimism. What is behind the optimism? Why do you believe that business is an adventure and that business has a role to play in shaping the societies and the world that we aspire to?
I was born an optimist, and I think it's a fortunate thing for everybody to have, to try to be, to be optimistic. But you also have to make your own optimism to an extent. And since I'm on stage at the behest of Virgin Atlantic, I'll just tell a fun story. So many years ago, I would come to South Africa and I would try to get permission to go and see the Minister of Transport and try to get permission to fly here. And every time they would say to me, Richard, yeah, we really would love you to fly. South African Airlines really needs competition. And then I would leave, and then a year later I'd come back, and it was generally a new person who was the minister. And they would say to me, you know, Richard, we really want you to come here, but we do need competition. And again, 12 months later, I'd come back again. And on this occasion, I went in there, and the minister said, Richard, we'd really like you to come there. I think the world of your airline, it would be just great for South Africa. And I knew I wouldn't hear from him for a year. So I went outside the building, and I got our press team, who had come down with me, to throw the biggest press conference we could. And we thanked this minister for his foresight in wanting us to come and compete. And by the evening, he'd given in, and Virgin Atlantic, ended up coming here. So, so you need a bit of the gift of the gab as well, just to try to push these things through and make your own optimism, I think.
All right. So, Emma, let's just talk about this. A lot of the times it is said that trade in Africa is not for sissies. I think we need to rework that, because if you look at the UK and Brexit, I don't know what on earth is going on. In fact, the only thing I know about Brexit is John Berco's order. That's all I can tell you about it, nothing else. And then Trumpland, there's a lot going on there. Hong Kong, we've seen protests that have been going on and on and on. And the whole world, we could say, is in turbulence. So can you share with us some of the epic challenges and fulfillment, I guess, of selling this part of the world as the appropriate place for commerce and development?
Yeah, thank you. Look, I think I'm a huge optimist as well. And as I travel all across the African continent, I just get so inspired by what's happening here. The innovation, the inspiration, the motivation, the drive, everywhere across this continent. And I think the opportunities really are boundless. But of course, there is a challenge in that. I do think that doing business in Africa is no different to doing business anywhere else in the world. So if we say that doing trade in Africa isn't for sissies, I think doing trade anywhere in the world isn't for sissies. I think it's about being brave and courageous and following your passion. And I think what I see everywhere I go is this extraordinary opportunity for bringing British innovation and entrepreneurship together with African innovation and entrepreneurship. And the combination of that is really, it's fabulous to see. I think too many people are not aware of the reality of Africa today. I think the history, the headlines of Africa are enduring in people's minds. And actually, I find that once we start talking about the reality of Africa and what is happening everywhere, and the opportunities that we see across every sector in pretty much every country on the continent, then you start to get people really excited. And as soon as people step foot in Africa and really start to pursue that trade, we see extraordinary things going on.
Okay, I know you're a diplomat and you have to be a diplomat, but I have to ask you this. So when you go around the world trying to sell our region, what concerns do people raise? Because you've almost admitted that you have to allay some anxieties, some perceptions. What do they say about us?
Sure, I think some of it is ignorance, I suppose. People just don't know enough about Africa. I think Brits seem to know quite a lot about South Africa, but often we find beyond that, that knowledge level drops away. So it's sort of an upskilling in knowledge and information. I think there is a heightened perception of the risk of doing business in Africa. But what I do say to people is, if you're doing business pretty much anywhere else in the world, and you think that you can do that comfortably, you can also find places to do that here in Africa and do really good business.
Mark, let me bring you in here, right? Here we are, takealot.com. It's disruptive. You saw something in society and you thought, what? I'm going to bring about change. Just take us through that journey and why you believed that your offering would be business out of the ordinary, business unordinary.
I think the initial decision was actually quite easy because when you look at it's similar to what Emma said just now, trade may not be different across the world. People aren't different across the world. So if you look to China, you look to the States, you look to the UK, online shopping is something that's just become part of people's lives. Online penetration in the States and in the UK today is upwards of 14, 15%. China, it's sitting at 18, 20%. So when we started the business, we looked at it and we said, there's a great retail market. Online penetration of retail in this country was nothing. So we saw opportunity. And that's why we started to build it. And we've managed to build 3 businesses out of it today. We've got takealot.com, the general e-commerce player. We've got superbus.com, the apparel and footwear online provider. And then we've also got Mr. D Food, which is growing very quickly as well.
Mm-hmm. Fanny, let me bring you in here. We talked about the world and the uncertainty. I imagine that running a business like Investec, a dual-listed company in the UK and South Africa, you've got to be open to change. You've got to be open to innovation. But it's not just about change, right? It's about when do you bring that change. So just share with me, is it instinct? What do you look at? How do you know as a business leader when it's time for change, especially because people are intimidated by change? I've just gotten onto takealot.com. Don't repeat that anywhere else. But that journey and that transition to the way I used to do things, to embracing something new, I imagine even those of you who are running these multi-international companies, you also have to think about when the time is right and what do you envisage. So for Investec, are you winning in this journey?
Yeah, I think if you think about the need for change and when it is that you know that you need a change, you have to take into account that standing still is not an option. I think we live in a world that is very disruptive by its very nature. So you have to embrace risk. You have to embrace different opinions. So at Investec, we have a very flat structure. We try to rely very much on the people that are on the ground because they know best what trends are coming our way. So just that cultural mindset where we look for our people to bring us ideas and to tell us what risks there are on the horizon. So we do both consistent improvement of what we do, but we also look out for new ideas. We operate in markets that are particularly highly regulated, and by nature, people tend to be resistant to change because you have regulation and you're always seeking what not to do. At Investec, we have a mindset of seeking what to do to solve a client's problem. And in that, I think we do have opportunities for new ideas, for innovation, and for our people to bring the kind of ideas that take us forward. We take the view that wisdom is not the preserve of the leadership of a business. We rely heavily on every individual that works at Investec. We rely on their ingenuity. We rely on their spirit of enterprise. We rely on their level of ownership of what we do. So we're always changing. We're always challenging ourselves. We're always asking, what could we do differently? How could we do it better?
I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about investing in people and why that is an important ingredient of a business out of the ordinary. But Richard, I also want to ask you then the same question, because over the many years that you have been an entrepreneur, a philanthropist, a business leader, I'm sure you've had to engage with change and ask, what does this mean for me? What does this mean for my business? How do you embrace it? How do you also get buy-in from the people that you lead?
Just adding one thing to what you were saying, a leader, I think, is a good listener. I mean, the worst leaders are leaders who are always talking, not listening. So anyway, I couldn't agree with you more. Sorry, I'm just trying to remember what your question was. Why did I go into
Okay. Everyone forgets, everyone makes mistakes, and I know I just made one just now about change and leadership, yeah?
I mean, I've been... I'm afraid this coming year is the 50th anniversary of Virgin. And in that time, we've set up, over 20 completely different companies in different sectors and so on. And if we had actually stayed 50 years ago with the record shops that we had, we would have been bankrupt. So we keep reinventing ourselves all the time, and we have a lot of fun in the process. We don't stick to one sector. We preciously value the brand, and we look after the brand, and the teams look after the brand and make sure that every new thing we do is the best in its field. But by diversifying, I mean, when the record shops were going down that way, we immediately went into Virgin Mobile Phones, and because we could see a lot of the money that was going on records was now being spent on mobile phones, and so adapting as we went along. How did we end up with Virgin Active Health Clubs in Africa? I suspect some of you know this story, but it's a good story, so I'm going to tell it again. We'd promoted a concert, 4664, which was the number that Mandela had when he was in prison, to try to bring awareness of HIV and AIDS, because Thabo Mbeki had taken the opposite view to Mandela. And he came along to the stage. That was fantastic. I went home that night. I just jumped in the bath when I got home, only to be told that Nelson Mandela was on the phone. And in those days, you didn't have mobile phones, so I got out of the bath, went to the phone.
You would get out of the bath if Mandela
put a very big flannel in front of me.
Hope so. We hope so.
And Madiba said to me, Richard, I want you to get straight back on that plane today to South Africa. He was president at the time. There's 5,000 or 6,000 jobs about to be lost in the health club and rackets and clubs, health clubs. And, we only had, 2 health clubs in England. So, these people had something like 80 in those days. And, but first of all, Madiba had rung, so obviously I had to get back on that plane that night. I've got lots of stories about you just never say no to him anyway, and generally it's good. And we just thought, screw it, let's do it. Let's try to have the challenge of turning it around and making Virgin Active really special in South Africa. And the team did a fantastic job. And they've every new club they create, I think, are fantastic. But so sometimes you just got to. You just got to look for opportunities and jump in where you think you can improve things.
Talking about jumping in, Kim, I mean, you started the business 9 years ago in South Africa, and this was considered out of the ordinary. And I'm sure you're constantly looking at change and opportunities. What would you say constitutes the out of the ordinary right now that you think is going to disrupt business?
Yeah, I think it's something that's been spoken about a lot lately, which is artificial intelligence. I think artificial intelligence in the world is going to change not only business, but also the world in many ways. And we look at business and efficiencies that you can get out of AI. I think that businesses who are not going to adopt artificial intelligence in the short to medium term are really going to struggle in the longer term to actually be competitive. I think that's really going to be a game changer. And you look at AI today, you can do AI algorithms can identify cancer. I think there's a test that's been done. In 86% of the cases, the AI bot was actually more correct than the doctor. Okay, you've got simple things like warehouse replenishment that can happen, automated warehouses, right the way to autonomous cars that are going to happen in the future. So these types of things are going to happen. I'm not being a futurist, I'm being a pragmatist right now. Mm-hmm. And I think that's going to change a lot of what's in the world, and I think that businesses need to get a grip on data, particularly, understand how they're going to use this data or how they're going to actually accumulate data, because businesses with more data are going to fare better than businesses without that data, because that data fuels the machine learning and artificial intelligence algorithms.
Okay, Richard got excited by something you said. Kim, let's hear it.
I completely agree, except that we do need to deal with what the effects are going to be on people, because I think people will benefit from health, from education, from safety in cars, a whole lot of things. But there is the danger that it's going to cost jobs, and so I think companies have got to start, and governments have got to start thinking about, if AI comes in, how are we going to make sure that people are employed? I think that people most likely, if you go forward 20 years, are going to need to get better at looking after their own leisure time. Companies are going to have to pay them the same as they would on a 5-day working week, on maybe a 3-day working week.
Did you hear that, Fanny? 3 days, Investec. We're starting with you tomorrow.
I did say 20 years' time. I thought I was safe by then. We are going to have to make sure that people have the ability to enjoy the fact that they're going to have 3 or 4 days holidays a week, I think. I mean, you could argue that new jobs will be created in different areas and so on, but I just don't think there's going to be enough new areas, and therefore we need to think about that.
Emma, let me bring you in here. I talked earlier about some of the challenges and concerns that you often have to address. But is there anything that you can think of that we need to work on in order to do business as South Africa differently? And I'm thinking here about what Kim said about data and artificial intelligence. And there's a whole lot of debate about South Africa and our policies. We have a whole lot of debate about the government talking about these issues, but not doing these issues. There's a lot of debate around education and how we prepare children in schools for this future that we are all talking about. So I think we can talk quite frankly and comfortably about that. But Emma, from your perspective, what do we need to work on?
So I think my answer to that doesn't just ring true for South Africa, but actually every country, because it really is about embracing the future, embracing technology. Because, I mean, look, with the best will in the world, we're never going to be able to build the thousands of schools, the thousands of medical clinics, and train the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of nurses and doctors and teachers that we need to be able to provide the lifelong learning and skills for our workforces, not just for today, but for the future. And so we need to embrace that technology that will enable us much more easily to be able to face that future and find ourselves with meaningful jobs, whatever they are, and we don't even know what they're going to be yet. But I think education is right at the heart of it, and not just for our youth, but for all of us here, so that we continue to learn every single day, not just from the jobs that we're doing at the moment, but from the future. I mean, just picking up Kim's point about artificial intelligence, I met just earlier today with a British company that has produced software which will significantly reduce the amount of energy consumption of every single laptop in the world, which can be rolled out, downloaded really quickly and easily. And it's those kinds of things that we shouldn't be scared of. We need to be courageous and forward-thinking about how do we, all of us, take responsibility for the cleaner, greener growth that we want to see for the future and the sustainable, inclusive growth that we're trying to build. So I think it is about embracing technology, being mindful of some of the risks of it, and using our collective intelligence to make sure that we are creating the right future using that technology.
And you also want to come in here, but I want to add a question as you answer, as you make your comment, that a lot of your competitors are really pursuing digital exposure. There's a lot of digital offerings. Tell us the Investec story, because I would say that the human connection is also so pivotal. And Richard, you talked about it earlier, that inevitably, or maybe it's not inevitable, people will lose their jobs. How do we position ourselves? And of course, your comment on what Emma said. Yeah,
so at Investec, we ask ourselves a number of questions. As an example, I had a session with 50 of our leaders last week in London, and we asked the question, why do we do what we do? Why, in the first place, do you bother to be in a bank? We then asked the question, what exactly should we be doing? And thirdly, how should we do it? What we do as a business is not unique. We don't produce products or widgets. So what makes the difference for us is how we do what we do and the experience that we give to our clients and the level of trust and partnership that we can bring. Because if you're dealing with issues of money, issues of investment, and lending money over a 10, 15, 20-year period, you need more than just data. So our view is that the choice between, on the one hand, human connection, and on the other, technology or data, that is a false choice. We believe in doing both. We believe that we can be high touch on the one hand and high tech. We believe that through the human connection, we actually can do more for our clients, understand them, understand where they are in the world. If you're a client, as an example of a bank, you generally get bombarded with lots of data. I mean, you watch a news program every evening, just the avalanche of data that comes through to you can literally overwhelm you. So what we do is understand that, declutter through human interaction and human connections to make sense of it, to help to make better decisions. So in our world, we do invest heavily in technology. At Investec, we do invest in robots, we invest in artificial intelligence, but our aim is to use technology to innovate, use technology to improve the relationship that we have with our clients, use technology to empower the human to be better at serving our clients. So we think we can do both. Obviously, we have to make sure that our education in this country improves dramatically, because if we do not do that, technology or the lack of understanding of technology will be a competitive disadvantage as we go forward.
Kim, I do want your thoughts on this, because we know our statistics when it comes to inequality. The entire world is up in arms over global warming, and we should be. And so how access to tech...
Not quite.
Not quite, actually. I'm thinking a couple of faces flashed in front of me, and I remember the conversations at the UN General Assembly as well in September, where the issue was amplified. So absolutely not. Thank you for that. So, but just seeing technology as an advantage, but also as having the potential to create new inequalities, particularly because not everybody has the exposure, the education, not everybody sits at the table when policies are being made. What are your thoughts about making it inclusive?
Sure. So if I look at where we are today in South Africa, technology is coming. Whether we like it or not, there's going to be AI, there's going to be machine learning, there's going to be things that change. So if I was a government in South Africa today, I'd be looking at education. Particularly, I mean, we've all spoken about it and all mentioned it, and focus particularly on maths and science. So, get education to where you need to educate people, put education close to the youth, put them in the existing townships, put great schools. Why should all the great schools be sitting in the suburbs, in the urban areas? Why are the great schools not actually sitting in townships? Why aren't the government focusing and putting loads of cash into... For me, there's two simple things they need to do. They need to, number one, just focus entirely on education. And the second thing is transport. In this country today, if I look at, we've got 2,500 people who work for us today, and they all need to get to work. Okay, they all, of those 2,500, I would bet, they're probably a good 1,000 to 1,500 who struggle to get to work, have to wake up early, have to pay exorbitant amounts of money for transport to get to work. Just get the simple things done, the basics. Focus on the right education, focus on the right areas of education, get transport right, and we've got a long way to go in this country still.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more on the education front, despite being somebody who left school at 15.
Good for you.
I spent yesterday. We've got a lovely place in Franschhoek, and we went into the area that was not so lovely in Franschhoek, and we visited 4 schools. The first class we went into, all the kids were sitting on the floor. They couldn't afford a seat, for the kids to sit on. There were anyway. It was very basic. All 4 schools were really quite basic, and I think if you live in an area or you have a business in an area, you really have to draw a circle around your business, and then you have to make sure that the schools, the clinics, all aspects are you care for, and your guests, say to your hotel, care for, and you take them out there. And if and it's not just relying on government to do these things. Businesses everywhere should draw a circle around themselves, and then those circles will start overlapping, and you can start working with neighbouring businesses to lift up the local community. And ultimately, it will be in the business's interest, because if you can lift people's standards, then they're likely to use your products more. So my very strong feeling is governments are not perfect pretty well anywhere in the world, and business has really got to step in.
And I would imagine, Emma, it is in those societies where there are such material needs, where opportunities exist for business, and it can be done. We need the government, yes, but we also need our own innovation, our own heart, our own disruptive mentality.
Absolutely. I think disruption is the key word here. And I think it's how do we reimagine education? Because as I said, I think for me, the future of education is our living rooms, our kitchens, it's our co-working spaces. Because we need to use technology to keep learning. And you're sitting in front of a blackboard, a whiteboard, anything like that is just that's education today, and it's not working for us. So thinking about how do you do education out of the ordinary? Actually, it's being able to beam education into everybody's homes and everybody's offices. So for me, the first step I would do is I would invest in the telecoms and bring 5G globally, supporting what a number of companies are doing to provide that around the world, because that to me is at the heart of how we provide a skilled population for the world that we are creating.
Just going back to what you said, maths, and what did you say? Science.
Science, yeah.
Yeah, so I would have left school at 14 if maths had been the number one thing at school.
Me too.
Obviously, look, there's 10% of the population where maths and science, they're cut out for it, and that's fantastic. They should have the best maths and science education there is. But for the vast majority of kids at school, you'll use the words reimagining education. I couldn't agree with you more. We need to try to make school a place that people enjoy, where they learn about the real things that are going on in life, where they can be in touch with nature, in touch with environment, a whole lot of different areas, and also where you can bring out the individual kids' passions. So it is maths and science, that we should go for that. But if not, I think that for the other 90%, we should be allowed to do other things.
Kim. Kim, okay, I'm biased here. I'm not a neutral moderator on this maths and science thing, because I'm one of those kids that the maths teacher had to say, Redi, even if I say 15 is greater than 12, you still don't understand. Or something like that. But in the English class and the history class, I did thrive. So I'm hearing Richard saying there's a place for all of us under the sun.
I think slightly differently again. I think everyone can learn maths and science. I think it's about the quality of the teachers. So, if you look at...
No, I had great teachers. Kim, I'm on Richard's side. Yeah, I had fabulous teachers, and wherever they are, thank you, I appreciate it, but it wasn't for me.
It depends. I think it does depend what you're going to do with your life. Yeah. I mean, I didn't know the difference between net and gross until I was 50 years old. I'm dyslexic. And yet we managed to build quite a big group of companies. I thought the gross was my profit and the net was my turnover. So it wasn't great news when I finally discovered about it. Actually, the way I discovered about it was quite amusing. This director, I said, "Is that good news or bad news?" He said, "Richard, come outside a minute." And he had this sheet of paper, and he penciled the paper in blue. Then he put a fishing net in the paper, and then he put little fish in the fishing net. And he said, Richard, I don't think you know the difference between net and gross. He said, the fish that aren't in your net, that's your gross turnover. In the net, that's your profit. And I finally got it. I name drop net and gross all the time now. But I think the point I'm trying to make is that, I was taught to add up, subtract, and multiply. Now, that didn't need to take me 10 years at school to learn those things. And for my profession, as long as I can add up, subtract, and multiply, and divide maybe, but I prefer to multiply. As an entrepreneur, you don't need to have spent 8-10 years becoming a maths expert. If you're going to be a mathematician or a scientist, then
Okay, this is loads of fun.
I'd like to ask one question.
Okay.
We're having fun here.
One question.
All right, one question, and I'm going to Fanny and Emma.
How many are there of you, Richard? There's one. For the rest of us mortals.
Yeah, but
now I agree with you.
There are now, fortunately, hundreds of thousands of entrepreneurs out there. They may not have all got the sort of public profile. They may not have built. I'm quite old now, so they may not have had the time to build the amount of companies that I've built. But in Africa, we've got something called the Branson School of Entrepreneurship, and we've helped. Virgin Active helps fund lots of little entrepreneurs, and they're not the kind of people who would have had a maths or science education, but they can see what people need to better their lives, and they just get on and do it. And then if you can always hire an accountant to add up.
Okay, I'm going to end this debate. We've got less than a minute. I did want to ask you how you get the everyday businessman to say, screw it, let's do it. But I'll give the final word to Fanny. Fanny, what do you want to say?
Yeah, just wanted to say that having taught mathematics at university, I do agree.
Oh, yes, you've got like a PhD in maths.
Yeah, I do agree that we complicate studying a lot. I think in the new age that we're in, we've got to make technology more accessible and use the power of the internet to connect people. We were in Washington, D.C. 2 weeks ago at the IMF World Bank meetings, and Megan Smith, who worked in the Obama administration as the Chief Technology Officer, gave us examples about how you can make technology and coding accessible to ordinary people without a high degree of mathematical training. I think demystifying, on the one hand, mathematics, demystifying on the other technology, and things like coding is really important, the mindset change.
We'll leave it on that inspirational note and wishing that somebody had demystified it for the rest of us. But I think that we've learned here today that it is about being innovative. It is about solving the problems that our society presents us with. It is about connecting with people, investing with people, and caring about the future. So thank you, all of you. You can take this backstage, by the way, okay? All right, they can just somewhere take it. Okay, all right? It's both, okay? Just a minute. It's both the most exciting and the most competitive time to be in business right now. And if you want to be the best, you need to deconstruct what's been done before and then build something new that is bigger, better, and more out of the ordinary. A big thank you to our panel. Joint CEO of Investec, Fanny Titi, Her Majesty's Trade Commissioner for Africa, Emma Wade-Smith. Thank you so very much. CEO and founder of takealot.com. I gave you a new name earlier, Kim Reed. Thank you. That's been disruptive, right? And of course, the chairman of Virgin Group, Sir Richard Branson, for sharing their truths, really, their insights around challenging the status quo to propel a more inspired tomorrow. Thank you. Okay, so, and speaking of tomorrow, what does it hold? We are deep diving into that impossible question next. The chairman of Virgin Group, Sir Richard Branson, and co-founder and former CEO of Investec, Stephen Koseff, will take the stage next to give us their take on on national and international prospects for the future. But right now, what do some of South Africa's most influential figures want to achieve in their futures? Let's take a listen.
I think business is all about gut feel.
Gut feel is informed by your value system and your experience, so it's very important. So in business, you combine gut feel and logic for you to succeed.
You know, when people say go with your gut, for me, it means, you know what, tackle the bull by the horn. Just go there.
As South Africans, we've been able to be competitive in whatever field all over the world.
You have to be adaptable, you have to change, you never know what's going to happen tomorrow, and that's what makes it exciting.
The reality is that it won't go smoothly, and there'll be adversity along the way, there'll be things that don't work out.
If you are scared to fail, don't start, because that's one of the guaranteed things in business. You will fail.
It's very much your attitude in those times of adversity that will determine whether you are successful or not.
Each and every person out there has a mind to think. So kick the door until every door is opened. Don't sit there and feel sorry for yourselves.
And hopefully you learn from the failure. Sometimes you don't, because sometimes you do everything right, but because of the circumstances, you still fail.
It doesn't matter whether somebody says to you, you are going to fall. It is important to fall. Wake up, dust yourself, and go out there.
And I think that's the key as well, is for us not to get bogged down in negativity, but to actually try and create the future that we want.
Is it all just about the money? No, it's not all just about the money. It's about the service you provide. It's about the development of the people. And of course, money makes business sustainable. It's important, but it's not the only thing.
And if you're doing a good job, the money will come.
I just want that dance off. I really did, hands down. This is Virgin Atlantic's Business is an Adventure in proud partnership with Investec. And right now, we are turning our attention to tomorrow, the future. No one can know what tomorrow holds, but if there were ever two men, I think, who might have some insight, some idea of what the future might bring, it would be these two. Let's welcome co-founder and former CEO of Investec, Stephen Koseff.
Hi, Redi.
Okay, so, of course, and we're still with the chairman of Virgin Group, Sir Richard Branson.
Oh, that's good to know.
Stephen, I'm going to pick on you.
That's
because
normal.
It's normal. The last time I spoke to you in a panel such as this one, you were quite frank about the problems that we face, but you were very optimistic as well. And that's because we were just on the cusp of a leadership change in South Africa. We've been on that journey now for a year and a half. The medium-term budget statement came out last week. We know that our national debt is, 3 trillion rands, and it will be 4.5 trillion by 2020. We got the youth unemployment figures of 58% sometime last year. Economic growth last week, economic growth 0.5 for 2019. I mean, what is the case for optimism in this part of the world?
I was listening to Richard earlier, and he was talking about he built his business because he was an optimist. So I think optimism is important. If you're a pessimist, then you can just lie down and die. And, I'm not that kind of person. I'm a glass half full person. And I think that what we perhaps didn't factor in when we had Ramaphosa was the kind of devastation that took place. Now, I want to give you a few numbers. Okay, I got Annabelle, I don't know if I saw her here, I think I saw her yesterday, to work out what was the GDP cost of, and I'll use a generic term, the Zupta era, to South Africa. So if we grew by what we were growing at, pre the crisis, which was 4-point-something%, we would have had an extra 1.3 trillion rand of GDP today. And when Tito would have been talking about his medium-term budget, we will be looking at rating upgrades, because for every rand of GDP, you get 28% tax, roughly. So they would have had in excess of 300 billion of additional revenue. That's why growth is so important, and that has been our historic fight, is what is important. Growth is important. Now, I accept the fact that the growth must be inclusive in a society like ours, but if we had a growth economy, we would not be sitting here sulking. We would be out there trying to, benefit from the growth. So if you took that extra 300 billion over and it's every year would have been a number, not the full 300 billion, you would have had debt to GDP at 30%. You would have unemployment probably at 16%. And that's Adrian Gore's number, not mine, but that's what he worked out with his actuaries. And you would have had a totally different country. We would have made a lot of progress. So to me, you asked the question, why are we still stuck? Well, I know at Investec, if we had a division that went haywire or went on the wrong road, you don't fix it in a year. It takes a while to get it back on track after taking some very tough decisions. Now, the uncle needs to take a few tough decisions. He's held back by his party, and in particular, the left of his party. And unless he takes tough decisions, and the first thing, I've been saying now for months, number one, you fix Eskom. Okay, now it took them a long time to come up with their plan. The plan is there, now execute it. And you have to bring private capital in. You can't put that whole burden on the government balance sheet. We can't afford it. Now, they hate the word privatization. Use any word. Don't call it privatization. Call it public-private partnerships. Call it anything. But just do it.
But Richard, I ended our last conversation on building leaders that say, screw it, let's do it. So with that theme and with the problems that Stephen has just articulated, how do you maneuver as a business leader in a climate like that, where there are all sorts of blockages? What has been your experience?
Yeah, first of all, just I think there are companies like Investec that do care about their society. There's an awful lot of companies in South Africa that don't care about the society, and they just say, well, that's the government's job. Yeah. It's not our job. So, and I think the second thing is it does take, to transform a country in 50 months is an impossibility. I think the most important thing that you have about this new government is a leader who's honest. And if you don't have a leader who's honest, it just ricochets all the way down through society, the police force, the customs officers, everybody become dishonest. And so he's had to move this big ship around and into a different direction. It's tough, but I wish him well, and feel a lot more confident investing in South Africa with him at the helm than the previous group. Sorry, I didn't answer your question. What was your question?
I forgot what it was. Never mind. Okay. Don't worry about it. But Stephen, you got...
No, just on the point, and on the point of leadership. I had one of the ambassadors of one of the large European countries come to me the other day and said to me, his mandate from his president is to help Cyril Ramaphosa. So if you went in the old days when we used to go to the World Economic Forum with the previous group, it was like, not very comforting. When you go with this uncle, you've got a leader, and you were talking earlier when I was watching on the stage, when Madiba used to phone, he would phone business leadership and say, Steve, you come with me, and then he'll have 500 women sitting there, and he says, you help these women. And he'll say to GT Ferreira, he took us to there in the Transkei, Mr. Ferreira, he took us to a hill, you build a school here. And he said to him, don't worry about the furniture, I'll get it from the Labner brothers. And he knew his way around. Now, Cyril knows his way around, or the president knows his way around. And he is much more like Madiba than the last uncle we had. And the last uncle didn't even know who we were.
So hold on, Stephen.
Madiba came to lunch one day, and with his newish wife, Gracia Michelle, and And I knew that if he came to lunch, we were in London, that it couldn't be a very, very expensive lunch. Anyway, we got through the starters. No requests, just lovely conversation. We got through the main course, just a lovely, delightful conversation. I went to the kitchen. I said, "Hurry up hurry up the pudding." They took just a tiny bit too long to get the pudding out. When he turns to me and said, "Oh, Richard, last week I had lunch with Bill Gates and he gave me $50 million for such and such a project." And I went, "Oh."
Okay, so Stephen, everywhere I go in platforms such as these, I meet people who are optimistic, people who want to do their best, people who want to build our country, people who want to build our world. You said earlier that our president is being frustrated, I suppose, or delayed by his party. I know that, but I also think, how much longer then can the rest of us wait as they sort out their own politics while our economy gets to its knees? I feel...
Welcome to Britain, America, Italy, Portugal. I mean, that's why, honestly, that's why business people have got to step in.
And that's exactly what my question is. Because I mentioned Brexit earlier, I mentioned what's happening in the UK, I mentioned the protests in Hong Kong, that these are corporate citizens. We don't want our country to collapse. No. We still have to have a country standing long after the politicians have gone. So let's leave them for just 1 second. What do you say to people in this room to encourage economic growth despite the politics that we can't fix immediately now?
Okay, so these people in the room, my understanding is they all run businesses. So they're all leaders. And leaders have to give people hope. You can't walk around being miserable and complaining. And you also have to be proactive in society. I heard Richard talk about, put a circle around the environment you operate in and help uplift people. And through that intervention, you start to get growth. Obviously, we need an enabling environment, and we need a government that is business-friendly. Some of their actions over the last while have not been too business-friendly, so they make people even more depressed, and then people exaggerate. They're coming to take my house, they're coming to take my factory, they're coming to take all these things, which is, just not true. And I think that it's up to us as business to do a lot more to help uplift people. I mean, you heard Tashmir here on the panel on the Youth Employment Service. It's like drawing teeth. I know we got 27,500 interns in the first year, but I go around, particularly to big business, and they say, "Yeah, but we're retrenching." And I said, "Got nothing to do with retrenching. You can afford it. I've seen your profits. You can afford to do your 5,000 target." So it needs a difference in attitude from business to say, this is our country. We can make a difference. We can help this country grow. Yes, we need an enabling environment, and the government mustn't do stupid things, which they can tend to do, like with the visa regime and all those kind of things. Now, he's promised us that he's going to fix the visa regime. He's promised us that he's going to be much more business-friendly, and we need that to happen. But at the same time, why wait? Just pick up the ball and run with it. 18 months ago, if you said South Africa would win the World Cup, people would have laughed at you because we were so useless. I think we lost, I don't know how many games in a row. They changed the leadership. They had a very competitive team across the spectrum. It was well represented by, people from different backgrounds. And because we were a team, because we worked together as a team, we won the World Cup against the odds. So we as a society need to work together as a team. We can't moan about this and about that. Just get going.
Okay, Richard, you're nodding?
I think we need to think, what is a government? A government is a group of people, generally, who maybe have only been in their job for a year or two. They're generally, this is most governments around the world, they're only likely to be in that job for a year or two. And so they need help. Now, business people can be around for a long time, hopefully, very long time. And they are also, a lot of them are quite entrepreneurially minded. So I think, it's not just helping in the community that's important for business people, and that's very important. But the other thing is to help governments. So, climate change, take as an example. I mean, we sat down with a small group of entrepreneurs, and we just brainstormed, if we were in government, what would we do to whip climate change which won't bankrupt our country? And I think have come up with ideas that can actually maybe sort out climate change. And we're now going to, talk to Cyril Ramaphosa, talk to, obviously not Donald Trump, but he's got one or two people around him we could maybe talk to. I would talk to him if I thought there was any hope, but anyway. And give them an opportunity to be the heroes in putting what I think is quite a good idea into practice to try to whip climate change.
I mean, Stephen, I'm reflecting on what you're saying and the many years that I spent on the radio and the projects that worked, that communities were talking about, that innovators were talking about. And we're always at pains to say to people, you don't need the government to get this off the ground. And they're so busy trying to survive politically that you actually have the latitude and the space to do the things that you think need to be done. Of course, we need them at that big level of policy making, but you can still roll up your sleeves and do something. What are your concerns about our youth at the moment? I do know Dr. Tashmia was on stage. I've spoken to her as well. You used to invite me at Investec when this was still a seed that she was planting. Talking specifically about that initiative, but also generally how, given all the problems that we've all been talking about, how we can still invest in young people.
Well, if we don't do that, we're going to fail as a society. I mean, the first challenge is the schooling system. So they were talking about maths and science when I was listening and watching the TV at the back. And Investec runs a program called Pro Maths, which it takes kids out of township schools and does an intervention from a Friday to a Sunday. And all of a sudden, these kids, from failing dismally, are getting A's for matric, B's and C's, as opposed to failing. Last year we had, out of the 1,200 kids that did matric, because there are 5,000 or 4,500 on the program in the last 3 years of school, 360 got A's. Out of a country population of 6,000, 250,000 wrote maths. In matric, 6,000 got A's. Out of our 1,200, 360 got A's for an intervention. They then go on to do, actuarial science, finance. They go to Fani for maths. Engineering, all these things that, 90% of the people probably aren't that good at. But you can, with an intervention.
Look what you're starting now.
No, I'm not. I'm saying you don't need that.
Yeah, you are agreeing with him. Yeah, I don't.
And I agree with him. You don't need that. But if you, an everyday human being, not everyone's Richard, and not everyone's very entrepreneurial, then you need to up your education. So we need to fix that. We need to actually change the education system. Someone suggested that we should just give everyone a grant and let the private sector run with the ball. And it's more than 20 grand a pop that the government spend on education doing a bad job. Yeah. And some of these private schools can do quite a good job for 20 grand. And you'll create a whole business and employ a whole lot of good teachers. That's where the unions also get in the way. They won't let you assess the teachers. Half of them can't teach a subject that they're supposed to teach. They buy their right to teach. I mean, how can you have a society where a teacher buys the right to teach and then can't teach a subject? I mean, how are we going to fix that? Those are things that we have to fix. And then, if we can get for the youth, what we're trying to do is get the jobs inside the environment, inside the villages, inside the townships, so that they don't have to spend 40% of their salary traveling to the centre.
Far away from work.
And try and create an ecosystem in the environment.
Richard?
Just thought I might bounce the thing that we're doing and see whether you think it makes any sense at all, and it'd be interesting to hear what the audience think. We've stopped asking people who are coming for a job at Virgin Group for their exam results. We don't want to know their school exam results. We don't want to know their university exam results. We'll do in-depth interview. They'll send a video in. We'll find out about their life skills, et cetera. But my feeling is that there are people who are good at learning facts at school, and there are people who are not. The people who are really good at learning facts, maybe 10%, and the other 90% are not necessarily good at learning facts. It doesn't mean that they're going to be the better employee. And I mean, our feeling at Virgin Group is that if every company stopped asking people for exam results, then schools would have to reinvent themselves. They would have to turn people into human beings and look for all the other areas.
Okay, I do have a final question about what the future looks like, but Richard, I can't let you get...
And he was about to say that he's going to stop asking for exam results, but anyway.
I'm retired.
I can't let you get off the stage without talking about climate change. And I'm watching the US presidential race and all these debates, and sometimes after 2 hours, not a single candidate has been asked about climate change and sustainability, really. It's not that something that is out there. It's the biggest risk to mankind. How should businesses adapt to that?
Okay, well, very briefly, the idea that I was talking about that we're putting to government is that every business has a carbon footprint. Now, taxing businesses for its carbon footprint have not worked. The Australian government fell when they tried to bring a big tax in on carbon. In France, there were massive riots in the street and so on. So, you know, how can we resolve this problem without taxing carbon? Anyway, our idea is quite simple, and that is that we work out our carbon footprint, and governments say that based on your carbon footprint, a percentage of your turnover or your profits, and you know, we're refining it at the moment, must be invested in clean energy. Must be invested in clean energy. Now, we're not taking your money, and this is the government speaking, we're not taking your money and losing it in the government coffers. You're able to invest this in solar, in wind, in Memphis meats, which is a new alternative to eating beef, etc. Beyond meat, planting forests. But you can also make profits from it, and you can get dividends from it. And if every company in Britain did it, you would have billions and billions and billions going into clean energy, would speed up the whole process really fast. And it seems to be a win-win for everybody, because from the public's point of view, if you've got more clean energy than dirty energy, the prices are going to come down, and they'll stay down forever. I mean, that's the lovely thing about the sun and the wind. The governments benefit because they're actually whipping climate change, and they're not taxing people heavily. And companies benefit because they can actually get their money back. Anyway, that's our entrepreneurial idea that we're trying to push through.
Okay, that was very important, because if we're going to talk about what the future looks like, there is no future without addressing these particular issues. Just stay with me for a little bit. But as we delve into this, a theme that we explored in our first panel, and now there's no greater optimism than youthful optimism. And while it is a privilege to hear our esteemed elders, can I use that word? Our esteemed elders. Madalas. It is also exciting to hear what the future of South Africa think about their futures.
I'm very excited about the future.
I like the future because it's exciting and it's bright. In the future, I want to be a horse rider. I don't know that one. I want to be a mother and own property so that I can take my children to Virgin Active and places, and that I can tell the people on my phone what to do.
For me, the exciting thing for me is that I'll be a grown-up and I get to do all the things that I want to do, like become an author and travel the world. But the most exciting thing I think is going to be in the future is robots.
My advice to the parents is to stop every boring thing you're doing and do fun things. My message to all the adults is don't leave the litter. What I want the parents to do is buy me sweets every time. If I was the president for one day, I would tell people to do the right thing. That's all.
Who do we have here? We have 10-year-old Daniel Petersen. Welcome, Daniel. We have 8-year-old Kamia Govinsamy. Welcome. Love your beautiful smile. We have Imbo Msengana, who is also 8. Okay, so guys, this is how it's going to work. I'm going to be a very nice lady and give you guys the final say. You're going to get to ask the questions that you want to ask. Daniel, what's your question for Mr. Koseff?
Mr. Koseff, what's the one thing you want all the kids in the world to know about money?
About money, eh?
Yeah.
That it's important. No, I think you've got to learn early in life how to live within your means and how to manage the money that you've got and not overcommit yourself and, learn the value of money. So, but you'll know money is important, but you must never be too greedy. So it's got to get a nice balance between having enough money to get the things you need and living a decent life and being able to educate your children and giving them a good start.
And I think you'll learn as you get older that you can only do so much with money. I mean, what matters is your friends, your family, your how you treat people. Do you look for the best in people? All these sorts of attributes. I mean, money hopefully can get you to be able to buy a roof over your head. Most people live in a kitchen, so a kitchen. But then actually, getting bigger and bigger and bigger houses is not essential. You want, if you can build a cozy home with the money you've got, and you've got a happy family, you'll go a long way.
Happy with that, Daniel? Okay, so Kamia, you also have a question for Sir Richard Branson. What is it?
Firstly, Sir Richard Branson, congratulations. Virgin is a really great brand. Son.
Thank you.
Get it? Then, Sir Richard, they say no man is an island. What is the importance of working together in our brave new world?
What's important in our brave new world? I think what's important is how you deal with people. When I was young, when I was your age, if I said something bad about somebody, my parents would send me to the mirror, and I had to look in the mirror for 10 minutes because they thought it reflected so badly on me that I'd said something bad about somebody. And therefore, I didn't say anything bad about anybody ever again because I didn't like watching my face for 10 minutes in the mirror. So I think always looking for the best in people is one of the most important rules that you can have, I think. Do you agree?
Yeah. Okay.
Do you always look for the best in people? Yeah, great.
Not always. Imbo Msengana, what is your question?
Auntie Redi.
You're asking me?
Yeah.
Oh.
Auntie Redi, one of your favorite interview questions is, how are you making this a better country? What is your answer to this?
My answer to that, I feel that I make this country a better country by connecting with ordinary citizens who don't have power, by creating a platform that gives them a voice, by telling them every day that I'm on air that their stories matter and that their problems matter, and that I will do my best to use my job to bring them closer to the people who must account to them and bring solutions to them. That's what I do.
Do you all go to nice schools? Do you sit on the floor at school or do you sit on a seat?
Seat. A seat.
On a seat?
Yes.
They all sit on seats, yeah. And how many people are in your classrooms?
30.
How many are you?
30.
30?
30.
20-something.
20-something, maybe 29 and a half.
And what,
And you, Daniel?
25.
what do you enjoy at school?
Work.
Art.
Art?
Break.
What
Break.
did you say? What did you say, Imba? Break. Oh, I didn't get that. So you enjoy books, art, and she enjoys break. We all enjoyed break, Imba, but we didn't have the guts to say it. You did it for us.
I'm the break person too. What about break dancing? Have you ever heard of break dancing? Can you break dance? Do you do dancing at school?
I do dancing at Leslie's
Yeah.
dance studio.
You got any dance moves you could show the audience? No, don't worry, we won't push it, because otherwise you might push me, and I'm definitely not going to do any dance moves. So. Anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you. You guys have been fantastic, and I think you are the best part of this panel discussion. I'm very proud of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's Daniel, Kemia, and Imbo. Thank you so very much for asking these pertinent questions. Thank you. And of course, thank you to Stephen Koseff, co-founder and former CEO of Investec, and of course, Sir Richard Branson, chairman of Virgin Group, for joining us to talk about the future. And I hope that it does look bright, but we have to create that. We have to work towards that. You've been a great audience. Thank you. We're done.
And just like that, that's it for this year's Johannesburg edition of Virgin Atlantic's Business is an Adventure, in proud partnership with Investec, who makes business human. A heartfelt thank you to all of our panelists, to our panel moderators Claire and Redi, and especially to Sir Richard Branson, and to all of our sponsors for making this grand adventure possible. And remember, always be true to you, always shake hands, always toast with champagne, and always travel the world. Make business an adventure. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again soon.